Hello class and welcome to week 1 of History and Systems of Psychology. This lecture video will serve the purpose as to introducing me, your professor, as well as going over a few brief items for your week 1 activities. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. So of course, if you have not read the announcements or the introduction, my name is Stephanie Wanamaker. I will be your professor for this 8-week course. There is a brief little overview about me, and if you want to get to know me a little bit more, you can view that in your announcements/learning activities. Here, I'll go to it for you. It's right about here. So before you get started, before you begin, get to know meet your professor, and it's right there. So if you want to read up on that, get a little information about me, you can definitely do so. For this week, you'll have a few items on the list. So for the first week, you'll have to read chapters 1 and 2. As well as review this lecture video that I am creating right now. You'll also have PowerPoint presentations, and I know a lot of students in previous courses have noticed that they really enjoy the PowerPoints. It helps them get through the reading, so if you want to use those, please be my guest. I will touch on those quite a bit throughout the course whenever I'm doing my lecture/overview of the material for the week, so stay tuned for that. You'll also have a couple supplemental reading articles and websites to look through. You will also have a few videos to watch throughout this week and also throughout the course. So look forward for those. I like videos because it gives you an interactive material instead of just reading straight in the textbook. So I definitely find them very helpful for me, and I hope that you guys find them helpful for you guys as well. You'll have your discussion board posts, and I want to touch on this too. So the discussion board posts, of course, you'll have your initial post, which is your discussion of the ideas and things like that. And I know many of you have probably done a discussion board post before, so this might not be too much of a surprise. But if it is, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will email you, and we can discuss discussion boards and things like that. So your initial post is, of course, 300 words or more, and that is due on Sunday, and as well as you need to respond to 2 of your classmates with 50 words or more. And as a reminder, the responses to your classmates is more than, hey, so-and-so, I agree with your thoughts. It should be, a more in-depth analysis of the material they covered, what you liked, or what you may have found that opposes their opinion, or what you agree with their opinion, and things like that. So I definitely think that these are great areas of where you guys can dig deeper into the material and get each other's opinions and feedback from your classmates. Lastly, you will also have another article to read on the history of psychology, which is here. And for this week, you do have an assignment. So this is the main portion that I want to discuss with you guys for this week. As I mentioned before, I like to go dig deep into the material and things like that, but I really want to focus on your paper for this week since it is due within the first week, and I want you guys to be prepared. It's a rather short paper, so it's a reflection paper. So it's not going to be your typical, peer-reviewed lecture, peer-reviewed literature paper. It's more of a reflection. So I definitely want to look at this in that lens, just to get your feedback and your ideas of what you're going to be discussing in this paper. So for this assignment, you will need to explain the role of learning history of the psychology, and understanding its current direction of the field. You will talk about it in your own personal perspective, maybe personal experience, personal understanding, as well as maybe what you learned throughout the reading for this week. And I talk a little bit about, how the history system is, I think, by far one of my favorite courses to teach, because it teaches you a different perspective in terms of how it developed, what direction it was going, and how it got to the direction that it is now. So I definitely think it's an important piece, and when you're learning and studying psychology, whether you take this on for your future coursework or your future careers and things like that, I definitely think it's great to get the background on information so you have a starting point. So you'll read the linked article here. It's an APA associated article or magazine. So I'll go ahead and click on that link. Let's see if it'll open for me. Sometimes it does that. It does have a few issues. But here's the article here. You'll read this, review it, go through it, just think of a few talking points, and then you'll use that for your assignment. So the first question that the assignment is asking is number 1. Did the article make a convincing case for the study of the history of psychology? And you'll add that into your reflection. So did the article make a strong case, like it says, for the history of psychology? If you believe it did, discuss that in full detail. And if you believe it didn't, also discuss that in full detail. And if you're in the middle, if you say it's a mix of the two, that's okay too. There's no right or wrong answer with this assignment. It's basically a mere reflection of your thoughts and opinions and your viewpoint on this assignment. So the next question you'll have, and I do want you guys to pay attention to the different levels of questions. So if you want to make subheaders on your paper so it can be an even flow, so just so you have that more information on how I can read your paper and have a great flow, you can introduce those subheaders and things like that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we discuss more about APA format. But I do want to remind you that there is an APA formatted paper for your review. So if you are struggling with that a little bit, you can look at that paper. But I will definitely do a full video on more details in terms of APA formatting. So look forward to that throughout the week of the course. So the second question, of course, is what benefit do you see in learning about the early philosophers? And of course, like I mentioned before, this is your own personal opinion. Do you feel like it's important that you learn about early philosophers of psychology? Do you feel like it's not? What do you feel the benefits are? And things like that. How can knowledge about the history of psychology help us better understand the field today and where it's going? That's along the same lines as your other questions as well. And also it's for you guys to practice writing an APA format. Please adhere to the APA guidelines for this paper. Even though we won't be doing, hard research on this assignment, I do want you to follow those guidelines. So if you do cite the magazine, the APA magazine here, please be sure to include the correct citation on your reference page and as well as within the text of your assignment. So like I mentioned before, the APA publication manual and materials, that is something part of the textbook requirements that you guys will need that will help you with your APA formatting. And that's a book that you will need not only for this course, but every single course that you have at CBU, because it's important for you to learn whether that's APA, MLA, whatever format. So I think the purchase of that textbook will be very beneficial for you, not only for this course, but for other courses that you may take here. So of course your paper is a minimum at least 1 page, so it's rather short. So like I mentioned before, it's a brief reflection, but make sure that's a minimum of 1 page at least. You'll include, of course, the title page. There's no abstract needed, and throughout the course you have a few papers, and I am not a stickler for abstracts, so be sure that if you have a paper, just know that you will not need an abstract for any papers in this course. I am a stickler for APA format though, so just be aware of that and make sure that you are following all the guidelines. So of course you'll follow APA guidelines using scholarly tone and spelling and grammar conventions. You will need in-text citations for factual information provided. So like I mentioned before, if you use any information from this magazine or any other scholarly article, please be sure to cite that within the text citation. I do have citation checker on your paper, so anytime you submit anything, it does check for plagiarism or source similarity, things like that. So just be mindful of that. Providing your reference page at the end of your paper, and also have a well-developed, support of all your opinions with academic sources. And just a reminder, websites are not considered an academic source, so just keep that in mind. So Wikipedia is not an academic source for your information. And there is a rubric for this assignment, so if you have any questions about what I'm expecting, that rubric will outline how to meet the perfect score for this assignment. But also, if that is something that you aren't understanding, please feel free to reach out to me and I can go over anything that you are needing in terms of this assignment or any other assignment. I do have an open door policy, so if you need any one-on-one information, please feel free to reach out to me. I am very open about that. So as I mentioned before, that is pretty much all I want to talk to you guys for this week. I really want to focus and hone in on your lecture or your paper for this week. I do want to pop open and see if there's anything I want to touch on within the chapters. I don't believe so, but just to look over a few things just to see. And I'll go ahead and pause it so I'm not scrolling through this. Hold on one second. So for your first chapter, it's basically, discussing a few areas of focus in terms of the chapter. So in this chapter, you'll focus on the knowledge, you'll understand historical context, you'll examine the roots of psychology, and you'll also discuss great individuals and the recurrent themes within psychology. So this PowerPoint is rather short, but it just takes you through specific scientific ideas and how they may be dismantled, ideology, and things like that. But the main focus I do want to touch on is Chapter 2 because it does have quite a bit of information, and it talks about the early psychological knowledge and how basically things were developed within psychology. So you'll have your 4 tenets, so where psychology and psychological knowledge was developed. You have, your psychological observations. You have scripture or religious scripture, things like that. You have folklore, and then you have early science. So this is the main area that psychology was focused on in the early times. And that's typically when you speak of, I mentioned, psychological observations. There's the observations that we can see and that we can observe. So those were what they considered. Back then, they didn't have the what we can't see, if you can say that, if that makes sense. So the unconscious and the conscious mind that Freud always talks about, and we'll talk about further, that wasn't as prevalent as it is now. So the observations that they had were behavior and its cues, cognition, how someone thinks, specifically how someone may express that. They had emotion, and they had specific knowledge, of course. And you can see this great little table, and it analyzes, those specific observations and the major findings that the earlier philosophers had in terms of these observations. So you had, of course, Plato, Aristotle, the main key people. But there's one other slide I want to talk to you guys about, which is quite interesting to me. It's not included. But a lot of these, in terms of psychology, in early times there was, as I mentioned before, psychological observations, but also folklore, and sort of witchcraft kind of thing. So you'll dig a little bit deeper into that once we get further within the material. But I also think it's really interesting how psychology was practiced at this early time, but it wasn't considered psychological methods. So I definitely think it's interesting. You'll find that so we have grown so much in the realm of psychology from what it used to be. But I definitely want to hear your feedback on the first 2 chapters and just get an idea of what you think. And I will definitely read that within the discussion board. So I definitely look forward to that. And I hope you find this material interesting. And be sure to introduce yourself in the introduction section, just to have a little background information. I think it'll be helpful. But overall, like I said, this is pretty much all I want to discuss for this week. If you do have any other questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I mentioned before, I definitely have an open book. You should have a couple announcements for this week. And I typically try to be very proactive with the announcements and any information that you guys may need. So with that being said, I think that is it. Oh, a couple other things too. Be sure to check out the syllabus. If you haven't checked out the syllabus, it has all your information in terms of textbooks, your projects, assignments, and you can see what you have due, as well as if you have not done your student responsibility assignment, please do that. You probably won't be able to watch this video if you haven't. So that is very, 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 very important for you to be able to see any material and to submit your assignment. So just make sure you do that. With that being said, that's pretty much all I have to talk to you guys about. I hope you have a great week. Reach out to me if you need to. And I'm here for you guys with anything that you need. And that is all. Until we talk next time. Bye-bye.